Sechas Nazir Daf Nun Vav contains one Mishnah towards the end of the Daf. Three primary sugyas. The Gemara is in the middle of a discussion about a statement of Rav Chizda that if somebody makes a long Nazirus longer than 30 days, and part of it he's a Mitzayra, those Taras days count as part of his Nazirus. The Gemara is going to ask two kashas on that. First from a lengthy cheshbon involving a Mishnah in the next parak, and then from a lengthy brisa. And then we get to our Mishnah, which introduces the topic of the relationship between things which cause tuma to a nazir and things which are forbidden to, which make one forbidden to enter the Beis Hamikdash. So let's begin. The Gemara has said, the Gemara is quoted Rav Chizda said that if somebody is a nazir for 30 days, as we've seen, and he's a mitzayra, muchlat, meaning a definite mitzayra for part of the time, when he's a mitzayra, those days don't count towards his nazirus. However, it doesn't knock down the days that he did before. Now, Rav Chizda said that if it's a longer than 30 days nazirus, then the days do count. So the Gemara is going to have two kashas here. The Gemara's first kashas from the Mishnah on Daf Nun Tes, which is complicated cheshbon. The Mishnah over there discusses somebody who has three problems. He has three potential things happening. He is beginning his nazirus, and on the same day he becomes a safek tumas meis, and he's also a safek whether or not he's finishing up his taras, whether he's healed fully from his taras, and now he's ready to start the procedure of being metaher from taras. Now the halacha is as follows: if he's a nazir, he can't take a haircut. He has to keep his nazirus. And obviously he also can't drink wine, and he has to bring a karbonas 30 days later. If he is Nazir Tameh, and this suffix Tumah struck him on the first day of his Nazirus, if he's a Nazir Tameh, then he has to take a haircut, and he cannot be Matahar himself until he takes the haircut, and only then can he begin his Tahara process, and he can be Matahar, and then he has to do his Nazirus, has to begin his Nazirus right afterwards. If he is a Mitzayra who's just completing his taras, then he has to do the procedure of the Taharas Mitzayra, which involves two haircuts. He has to take a haircut at the beginning, 7 days later or further, meaning at least 7 days, possibly more. He has to take another haircut, and he has to bring karbanas, and then he can be tahar. Now, the taras purity takes precedence over the nazirus. It also has to be taken care of before Tumah. Now, he can't take these haircuts because he's only a suffix whether he's chayav them. He's only a suffix whether he's tameh, and a suffix whether he was a mitzayra who is healing. So he's vadai nazir, so he can't do any of these. So what does he do? So the Mishnah says as follows. The Mishnah says that he cannot get out of his naziris until 120 days later. That means he has to go through 4 periods of 30 days each. He has to go through 4 naziris, and he has to keep his naziris 4 times. Now, karbonas he's not going to be able to eat until after 2 times. We're not going to get into that here because this is a complex enough sugya. The Gemara will discuss that at length in Daf Nun Tes and Daf Samach, so we'll leave that for then. Now, the way it works is as follows. So when he first comes and he says, okay, I want to keep my naziris, we tell him, you can't keep your naziris because you might be tamei and you might be a mitzayra who hasn't been a matahar yet, so you can't do naziris. Naziris doesn't work during those times. So he says, okay, so let me do my taharas mitzayra or my taharas tuma, my procedure for a nazir tameh. So we tell him you can't do either of those because those require a haircut, and you can't take the haircut because you might be a nazir who's not tameh in any way. So he says, well, what am I supposed to do? So we tell him you have to do your naziris, you have to keep 30 days naziris, because that is the only way to take care of the possibility that you're really a nazir. However, it's not really going to help you because you might not be being geared to your naziris now, because you might be in mitzayra and you might be tameh. So first thing he has to do is keep 30 days naziris. After those 30 days are up, we say to him, okay, now on the possibility that you were a real nazir who wasn't tameh at all, you took care of it. We just have to, so now you have to consider the possibility, though, that you were tameh. If you were tameh, so then you have to now take a haircut and do the process of taharas nazir tameh. So he has to do that. He has to take the haircut, has to bring those karbanas. The Gemara will discuss later how he's allowed to bring those karbanas, but he has to bring those karbanas. And now he has at least done the procedure of taharas nazir tameh. Now, he now automatically begins another period of naziris. He can't drink wine yet, because on the possibility that he was tameh, now is when his Nazir is the first beginning. What he did up till now was nothing, and is becoming a Nazir now. So he has to keep another 30 days of Naziris. Now, at the end of those 30 days, he says, okay, let me drink wine now. We say to him, hold on a second. But we don't know if this Nazir is counted, because maybe it would have been a Mitzayra. If you're a Mitzayra, Nazir doesn't count. So, therefore, you're going to have to do another Naziris now. And first, you got to be Mataher from the possibility of Taras. How do I do that? So we'll say to him, well, you did one haircut already. So we're going to make you do another haircut now. And it's actually not just a haircut, it's a shave of all the hair on the body. And he can do that because his second Naziris, which may be the only Nazir, has now ended, and therefore he can do his Naziris. Now, he couldn't take a shave 7 days after his first one because he might be in the middle of his Naziris then. So he's got to wait until 30 days later, then he can do his next haircut. Now, if he says, okay, now I want to drink wine now, again, like we said, he can't because he may have been a Mitzvah all that time, and therefore he's just beginning his Naziris now. So that possibility works as follows. He was a Nazir, he was a Mitzvah all this time. He did his first haircut after 30 days. He did a second haircut on day 60. Now he's gotten out of his Taras. So we know that the Taras is taken care of, but we still have to, so he now has to give him another 30 days because he could be beginning his Taras now. But in the end of those 30 days, we're up to day 90. Now we tell him, hold on a second, you still can't drink wine because you may have been a Mitzayra and Tamei Meis, on the possibility that you're a Mitzayra that has to be taken care of first. So those were your two haircuts. And therefore, at day 60, you did your second haircut, completed Saras, and only then did you start your actual Taharas Nazir Tamei. So you got to do 30, and you did 30 days to get out of that. But now that is finally over because only now are you actually completing that process by taking another haircut. And therefore, you're going to have to take a haircut now to complete Nazir Tamei. And now you can start your fourth period of Naziris, which is definitely going to be Naziris according to all options. The only possibility left is that you are Tamei, Nazir, and Saras. And now you took care of them. Your first two haircuts took off the Tzaras. Your third haircut took off Nazir Tamei. Now you're a real Nazir, and now you're going to finally deal with that. That's the mission. Then the mission says, and that's all true if it was a 30-day Naziris, because he has to do the period of Naziris 4 times. If it was a Naziris that's longer, let's say for a year, then he has to keep Naziris for 4 years. He's going to have to do 4 periods of Naziris. Same cheshbon, except instead of it being 4 sets of 30 days, it's 4 sets of a year. Now, and of course, it's Kabbalah, he can eat after 2 years. And again, we'll go through that cheshbon when we get to this Mishnah Daf Samach. Now, the Gemara's question is as follows. According to Rav Chizda, if it was a Naziris longer than 30 days, his Naziris counts while he's a Mitzayra. If that's true, so then during the time that we were considering that he's a Mitzayra, so he has to deal with his Taras, that should be counting towards his Naziris. If that's true, so then a year got used up, so you should take a year off. So you shouldn't have to keep 4 years, you should only have to keep 3 years. However, he does have to keep 30 days, because like we saw on the last daf, you have to have a minimum of 30 days before your haircut ending your actual Nazir. So he's going to have to do 3 years plus 30 days. And this is a clear kasha on Rav Chizda's halacha that if it's a longer than 30-day Naziros, and like we said before, longer than 50 days, because you have to have 30 days, then it should count towards his, then the days of Taras count towards his Naziris. Here you see clearly that that's not true. That's the Gemara's first kasha. Now the Gemara has this second kasha, which is brought by Rav Ashi, who brings a brisa. The brisa is bringing me the source of the halacha, and it says so straight out. It says that the days of Tumas Taras don't count as part of the Naziris, and it discusses 3 types of days. It discusses days when he's Tamei Meis, days when he is a Vade Mitzayra, and days when he's Hesker, when he's a locked up Mitzayra. And it brings Kal V'chomers between all of them. So the Brisa says as follows. First, it compares the days of Tumas Meis to days of Vadai Taras. Now, as we know, the halacha is that the days of Tumas Meis knock out anything he did before he became Tamei. He has to start over. The days of Taras definitely don't do that. He most definitely gets to count the days that he was a Nazir before he became a Mitzayra. And the Brisa here wants to prove that you should be able to learn from the days of Tumah. Just like the days of Tumah don't count towards the Naziris, the days of Taras also should not count towards the Nazir. So first it says you should just compare the two. The days of Tumah, he needs to take a haircut and bring karbonos when it's over. The days of Taras also you have to take a haircut and bring karbonos when it's over. So you should learn the halacha from one to the other, just like from Tumah, the days don't count towards the Naziros. The days of Taras Vadai, it also shouldn't count towards Naziros. The Gemara says no, can't necessarily learn from the two, because Tumah is more chamer, because it knocks out the days before Tumah, but Taras does not knock out the days before Nazir, so you can't learn from there. So the Gemara brings a Kavach Chaimer, and the Gemara says you could learn from Tumah to Taras, because look at this follow. Somebody who makes himself a Nazir in a cemetery. He's tummy from the time he makes the Naziris. What's the halacha? The halacha is that he begins his Naziris when he leaves the cemetery and he's matahar. And he has to do the procedure of Taharas Mitzayra, of Taharas Nazir. Now, the hair that he's growing now, he's going to use as part of his Nazirus procedure. It's kosher hair. There's nothing wrong with that hair. He's going to use it as part of his Nazirus procedure. Yet, the days that he has now don't count towards the Nazirus. That's for sure true, because the Nazirus here hasn't started yet. It doesn't start until he leaves. Now, think about a Mitzayra who's a Nazir. His haircut, his hair is no good. He's not going to be able to use this hair because he can't start counting until he has finished his tzaras, and he has to take a haircut when he finishes tzaras, and this hair is going to be no good. He's going to have to grow new hair to use for his Nazirus ending procedure. So therefore, this is more chomer. His hair is no good, and therefore, certainly, if the tameh doesn't lose, if the days that he had do not count, certainly this one, the days that he has, also should not count. Now, therefore, the Brisa settles with that. That's a source that the days of Vadei Tzaras don't count towards the Nazirs. Now, the Gemara says, what about after he finished and healed, and now he's working on being retire himself from Tzaras? Does that count? So here, the Brisa just says you compare it to the days of Vadei Tzaras before he heals. Just like they both require, just like the time of Vadei Tzaras requires a haircut, and it doesn't count, so these days also require a haircut at the end, and they don't count. That's the second haircut that a Mitzayra needs in his Tahara procedure, and therefore they don't count either. Now the Brisa moves on to the third thing, and that's while he's locked up. When a Mitzayra is locked up, he's not a Vadei Mitzayra yet. He's a Safek Mitzayra, but he does have certain Tumah halachos. So the Brisa wants to say you can compare the two. Just like a Vadai Mitzayra is Metame, things that he sits on or lies upon, and his days don't count towards Naziris. Same thing should apply to a person to a Mitzayra Safek who's locked up. He's also Metame, things that he sits on or lies upon, and therefore you should say also that his days don't count towards his Naziris. So Gemara says no, there's a very big difference. Because after being a Vadei Mitzayra, there is certainly going to be a haircut and karbanos. But after being a Muskar, a locked up Mitzayra, there's not necessarily going to be a haircut and karbanos. He could just be cured and purified, and therefore you don't have any issues. So therefore you cannot learn to the days of Hesker, and therefore the days that is a Safek that is locked up do count towards the Nazirs. So that's the end of the Brisa. The Gemara makes this point. The Brisa clearly stated that the days of Tzaras don't count. And now the question is, was it talking about where it's a 30-day Tzaras, or was it talking about where it's less than where it's more than a 30-day Tzaras? So it says, well, it can't be talking about a 30-day Tzaras because it can't count, because that would mean that he has less than a full 30-day growth of hair when he's ending. So it's got to be talking about where it's longer, and it clearly says that it does not count. So we have another proof against Rav Chizda. Even a long Naziros, longer than 30 days, the Naziros that overlaps with Tzaras, those days do not count. All right, now we begin the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses what happens, what is the relationship between the things which are Matame, a Nazir that he has to start his Naziris over again, to the halacha that a Tamei person can't enter the Beis HaMikdash. So it's a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer in the name of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Eliezer in the name of Rabbi Yeshua says, any Tumah that makes a Nazir take a haircut and start his Naziris over again also makes him chayiv kares for going into the Beis HaMikdash with that level of Tumah. So the complete list we used in our last Mishnah applies to this as well. And the reverse is true as well. Any Tumas Meis that does not make the Nazir start his Naziris over again, he's not chayiv if he goes into the Beis HaMikdash like that. Rabbi Meir disagreed, because Rabbi Meir said Tumas Meis has to be more chomer than Tumas Sheretz. Tumas Sheretz, a person is definitely not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash with that. It's clear, it's first in the Psukim. And Tumas Meis, even if it's a lighter or smaller Tumas Meis, and it doesn't mess up a Mitzayra, and it doesn't mess up a Nazir, that is, has to be worse than Tumas Sheretz, which is just when the Shemona Shatzim, and therefore it certainly asks him from going into the Beis HaMikdash itself. Now, the Gemara begins by focusing on the fact that Rabbi Eliezer quoted Rabbi Yeshua. Now, when you mention Rabbi Yeshua, it's Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanani, if you don't specify the name, but there are many other Rabbi Yeshuas. And we have an incident where Rabbi Eliezer is clearly not quoting Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanani, he's quoting Rabbi Yeshua ben Mammel. The Gemara quotes the incident. So the Gemara says, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer says, when I went to a place called Ardiskaya, I found Rabbi Yeshua ben Pasar, who was Ben Pasar Roish, who that's his name. He was sitting and learning by Rab Meir, and they were discussing the halacha of Tumas Meis and Tumas Mikdash, and they were saying that, and he was saying to Rabbi Meir that any Tumas Meis that makes a Nazir take a haircut and cancel his Nazirus, he's chayiv karis if he goes into the Beis HaMikdash like that. And any Tumas Meis that does not make the Nazir take a haircut, he is not chayiv if he goes into the Beis HaMikdash like that. And Rabbi Meir said, but this can't be lighter than a sheretz, and therefore he argued and said that it should. Just like we have in our Mishnah, except that in this brisa, Rabbi Eliezer continues. And Rabbi Eliezer said, and I said to him, are you not familiar, are you not a baki in the words of Rabbi Yeshua ben Mammel? And he said, yes. So he said, Rabbi Yeshua ben Mammel said to me, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, that's Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, any tuma caused by a mace that a Nazir takes a haircut and brings... has to start over, he's also chayiv, or anyone's chayiv, if they go into the Beis HaMikdash with that tumah. Any tumas mace that does not cause it, he's not chayiv if it goes into the Beis HaMikdash like that. So you see clearly that he's quoting Rabbi Yeshua ben Mammel and not Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania. So the Gemara says that there's no problem. It's Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Mammel. So he got it from Rabbi Yeshua bar Mammel. He was the original source of this halacha. So there he said it over in his name. But it was Rabbi Yeshua ben Mammel got it from Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania. So he says it there, name Rabbi Yeshua bar Mammel, but in our Mishnah it goes back to the original source of it, which was Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania. So the Gemara says, so you see from here that whenever you say over a sugya, you say it in the name of the first person who said it and the last person who said it, but you don't have to say over everybody in between. Because that's what happened over here. You only said the first person and the last person. He said Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania and Rabbi Yeshua ben Pasar here. We're saying it in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, who quoted it, who was the last person to say it. We did not mention Rabbi Yeshua bar Mammel, who was in between. Now, Nachum Yitzchak says, we learned that as well in the Brisa. It says, Nachum the Lavlar said, I was Mikabel from Rabbi Miyasha, who was Mikabel from his father, or from Abba, who was Mikabel from the Zugos. That's the pairs of Talmidei Chachamim, which you find in Pirkei Avos. And they were Mikabel from the Nevi'im, who got Halachah Mishmi Sinai, somebody who plants on Shabbos. And if you have mustard spread out in 2 or 3 places, that even if you have different crops, you only bring one payah from all of them. Several halachos that he quotes in their name. Either way, he does not mention Yeshua and Kalev, who are on the list of Masorah. He just goes back to Halacha Mishmi Sinai, and he skips a few and goes straight to the Zugos and the Nevi'im. So you clearly see you don't have to mention everybody in between. And that concludes this Gemara. And now the Gemara brings the next Mishnah, which takes us to the end of the parak, and we'll squeeze it in here. So this last Mishnah says as follows. Rabbi Kiva says, I said a Kavachomer before Rabbi Eliezer. The Kavachomer was discussing if a revius of blood causes tumah for a Nazir to have to take haircut and start his Nazirus over again. In our last Mishnah, we said no, it has to be half a loig, which is twice as much as a revius. But here Rabbi Kiva says, and he argues, and he says that yes, it would. And he brings a Kavachomer from Etzem Kasair, that is a bone the size of a barley. Now, bone the size of a barley is not matami tumas ohel, but it is matami the Nazir to start over again. A revius of blood is matami tumas ohel. So says Rabbi Kiva, if it's stronger than an etzem kasaira that it's matami tumas ohel, it should certainly be at least as strong as an etzem kasaira that it's matami the Nazir. So he says, I said this to Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Eliezer said, Akiva, what are you saying? We don't make a kavachomer on a halachal mishmi Sinai. Or his words were, we don't make a kavachomer here. And then he says, I said this in front of Rabbi Yeshua, and he said, you said good, and we established the halacha, unless it's not that way, then there's nothing you can do about it. So the Gemara wants to know, what was Rabbi Eliezer's resistance to this because of Halachah Mishmei. He said he can't make a Kal V'chomer based on Halachah Mishmei. What's the Kal V'chomer he's referring to? What's Halachah Mishmei is referring to? He's referring to the Halachah Mishmei that an Etzem Kasa'ira is Mitame and Nazir, or is he referring to the Halachah Mishmei that revius of blood causes Tumas Ohel? Which is the problem here? Which is the one that blocks the Kal V'chomer, which uses both of them? How is the Kal V'chomer structured that it's based off Halachah Mishmei? They have a problem. So Marco Tzabraiser, he says clearly that the Etzem Kasa'ir is Halachah Mishmei, and you can't make a Kal V'chomer from that, or a revius of blood from Halachah Mishmei, and therefore that's what he was focusing on.